we'll move on and talk about transfers, because that's obviously the thing that most people want to speak about. And obviously the news is ramping up again, obviously after a quiet time over the past 10 days or so without transfers. But it is something people want to hear about, and it's something people want us to speak about. So we will do that without further ado. Now, I put on the caption here, lots of moving parts, and there are, because it's so hard to get a handle on what's going on. But we're going to hope David can shed some light on what may or may not be happening, even if it is founded in of a speculative nature at this stage, because obviously Liverpool won't have been as open, I suppose, to telling David or anyone else much of anything about transfers over the past little while. So we have to have that context around all of this, because normally a lot of the sources that David would speak to, that I speak to, anyone involved in football content would speak to about transfers. It's very hard to get information when information is not forthcoming, and you are reliant on that information to be able to share it. So that's just something we should keep in mind as we discuss this. But things are starting to come out, David, and the first thing is Ibrahima Konaté. Obviously, there's a lot of noise surrounding Ibrahima Konaté and Real Madrid and free transfer, and a lot of the stuff that we heard all last summer about Trent Alexander-Arnold, and then obviously that stepped up with an inevitable conclusion that he did end up leaving the club, not quite for free, but pretty much for free. So should we now be concerned about Ibrahima Konaté? There's talks that he's refused another contract from Liverpool, which I believe maybe the second or third refusal of an offer, and the shall we say, the mood music isn't looking good as far as Konate is concerned. But equally, we saw yesterday that Liverpool were playing fullbacks as centre halves in a friendly with Stevenson in the first half and Robertson in the second half. They've sold Gerald Quansah. There's no news on Mark Gay new yet that we're aware of. So where are we with Liverpool centre halves, and where are we in particular with Ibrahima Konaté?
Yeah, so with Konate at the moment, the sounds coming from his camp are still very much, all this talk about that he's lining up a Real Madrid move, and this rejecting the contracts is all the front because he just wants to join Real Madrid in the end. Like I say, the sounds we're hearing from his camp are very much that is not the case, and that in an ideal world, these contract negotiations will come to an end with him extending his stay at Liverpool. So, and I think that the fact that they're being so vociferous in that as well, that stance, makes me think that there's some truth to that they do want to sign with Liverpool. It's not just about kind of stringing them along until you can get a contract from Real Madrid. So we see how that goes. And I think the fact that, even you can even take some encouragement from the fact that contract offers are being rejected, because that means contract offers are being made. That talks are still ongoing, and Liverpool, again, they point to the fact that, look, we signed up Salah and Van Dijk very late in the season. These things can drag on. It can happen. It's fine. We're relaxed about it. So, you can kind of, I suppose it depends whether you're a kind of glass half empty or a glass half full person. But I think with this one, still of the belief that the talks are ongoing, and there is hope on both sides that a resolution will be reached. But we, of course, we see with Trent, we see with Virgil van Dijk, there's different ways that this can pan out. But one thing I would counter, and I know people are saying this a lot, is, okay, well, if he's not going to sign or whatever, just sell him. But the players also got to be willing to go. There's got to be suitors out there who are willing to pay a price at this point that Liverpool think is acceptable. And for me, I think it would be, even if you can't get there in terms of the money and you can't make it right to get him to sign a new contract, I still think it would be foolish to sell him at this point. I think the aim has surely got to be to make Liverpool a title-winning team again next season. And the way you do that is not by selling the centre-half who played 30-odd games last season. He's just too important to do that. Liverpool will make money in the transfer market elsewhere. I don't think they're so desperate that you need to flog Konate. Absolutely need to get rid of him this summer, even if he won't sign that new contract. I think that would be a foolish decision is my view on it, really. I think it's much better to keep hold of him, and even if you can't get a resolution there, you've got a team there that can win the title next season. That far outstrips everything for me.
Yeah, I know. I see the comments coming in, and pretty much everyone to a man is at the moment saying that they would sell it. That, like what you say, it's very difficult to have that mindset. The club can have that mindset all they want, but the player has to be willing to move. And if those offers aren't coming in for the player, then, and I mean, the way it works, to my understanding, certainly with Real Madrid, is they'll have put this groundwork in over the last sort of 6 months. They'll have been looking at whose contracts are ending for next summer, and they'll have had a word and says, look, don't accept any moves to sale. We're coming in next summer. It's going to be a free. and then the player says to the club, I only want that move, or I only want to stay with you, or I'll go to Real Madrid while we're discussing the contract. So it takes a lot of Liverpool's power away and gives it all to the player really here in this situation. And it was the same. I was very critical that Liverpool, if they didn't think they were going to be able to sell Trent last summer, if that opportunity wasn't going to be there, then they should have at least made an effort to. And to all intents and purposes, it doesn't look like they did. So the club do, as you say, seem pretty relaxed about these situations, even though as fans, it's very frustrating to go into these summers and think we're going to lose another player for free. After all the players that have left for free, we're going to lose another one of our stars for free to Real Madrid, who are unwilling to pay for people. But this, I suppose, is the big fish, little fish, and I hate to describe Liverpool as a little fish in this situation, but when it comes to Real Madrid, everyone's a little fish, let's be honest, and they do have this means of getting into players' heads.
I think people, we get too focused on it as well, though, in terms of, you've got to get a fee for certain players. Like I say, the club, they're not as fixated on it, I think, as some people believe. They sell well generally when they're when they are capable of doing so. And if you do that, then sometimes you allow yourself and you leave yourself the room to make decisions like eating the fact that you might lose a player who's important on a free transfer. So, getting what they got for Jarell Quansah, getting what they're probably likely to get for Harvey Elliott this summer. Quivine Kelleher, they got a decent fee there for someone who's in the last year of his deal. They're not doing too badly in terms of generating money. And basically all they're trying to do really is kind of, it's not necessarily, oh God, we've got to cash in on this guy, we're going to lose him for free. It's like, the more the thinking is really, how big of a window can we give ourselves to win major trophies? How long can we keep the team together that's capable of winning major trophies? Because the longer that you do that, the more likely it is that it falls for you on certain seasons or whatever. Maybe it falls for you in back-to-back seasons. So they're more thinking about that than necessarily the cashing in, because they know, for a team that is good, for a team that buys well, for a team that brings quality prospects through the academy, they're going to make enough money in the transfer market to cover off a lot of their business anyway. They've not got a huge net spend in recent years. So sometimes you are just going to have to accept that the player goes on a free. But like I say, they are way more relaxed about that than I think a lot of people are, because they know they make the money in other ways. They know that they'll make the money through a Quansah sale, or a sale of any player this summer, or any of the recent sales. They know that that's going to happen enough times for them to sometimes accept that even if they keep Konate for another year, it gives them a better chance of winning the league. And then maybe he does go on a free at the end of the season, but they're kind of okay with that. They kind of accept that that's kind of the dangers of doing business in football. So I just don't think it's something to worry about too much. And for me, as I say, I think from a fan perspective, really, I'd say that the bigger priority above anything else that happens in terms of Konate's long-term future is to keep him for the coming season, because I think if you do that, you've got a far, far better chance of retaining that Premier League title.
Yeah, there's already quite a lot of upheaval, obviously, without something like that. And as we always say, title-winning teams are built from the back, and he's very much part of that. So I'm pretty confident he will stay this season. I don't see any change there. I know you're saying that his camp are very much along the lines of that it's not a foregone conclusion that he joins Real Madrid, but equally, it's in his camp's interest and in his interests during negotiations with Richard Hughes and Liverpool to suggest that Real Madrid is there. You know what I mean? It's just basic negotiation 1.0. You know what I mean? To make that very abundantly clear that Real Madrid are there, because that, without a shadow of a doubt, would have made sure that Trent got higher offers from Liverpool. Obviously, didn't take any of them, but that Real Madrid in the background would have ensured Trent got higher offers than he would have got if they hadn't been. And that'll be exactly the same for Ibrahima Konaté, won't it? So there's a lot more nuances to this, and sometimes I think we see as outsiders.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was it. And I think with Trent as well, I think sometimes that kind of, it's slightly over-egged how early he made his decision. I know everybody wants to paint him as someone who absolutely, he's a rat and he's this and that. And he knew 12 months ago that he was going to do this. I'm not entirely sure that's the case, to be honest. My feeling is there that, yes, I feel that there was some kind of element of it being contrived and put together because, the fact he only signed a 4-year contract, for example. But I think what he wanted to give himself was the option, was to say that he would have Liverpool fighting for him and Real Madrid fighting for him, and then he could make his decision. And I don't think that decision was made as early as people would suggest. And I think, from Konate's perspective, as you say, it's helpful to have both fighting for him. He can make that call at some point. He can decide whether he wants to go and do it, or maybe he decides against it. But Liverpool, because they know Real Madrid are there, are giving him an even better contract offer. So, it's not. I think it's just. It's all part of the dance, isn't it? It's basically one way of saying this, really. And, I know fans don't like it and it feels like you're being used, but that's football, and you've kind of just got to accept that's how it is. But I do, there's an element there where I do believe that I do believe that aspect that he hasn't made up his mind and he's already in Real Madrid or anything like that. I think there's still a chance here that Liverpool are able to tie him down if the contract offer is right. We just see how that plays out.
And I think I'm going back a little bit here, but when the talk broke, I think it was around November time last year that Konate was in talks about with a new contract. And I think some pieces came out pretty favorably saying they expected that deal to get done. And that made sense to me. It made sense to try and get Konate nailed down before you finish Virgil van Dijk's contract, before you rose that wage ceiling. And that's not happened. So that again has put more ball into Konate's court with the Van Dijk deal being done, the wage ceiling being what it is, and him thinking, well, if Virgil's worth that, I know that they probably don't tell each other exactly what they're getting, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility. They have an idea, agents speak to each other and they will have an idea of what each person's worth and what each person's being paid. So again, the Virgil van Dijk contract at age 34 gives Konate at his age and coming into his prime, it gives him scope to say to Liverpool, well, if he's worth this, I know I'm not worth that, but I'm certainly worth this. So there is, again, I'm putting more vagrancies and more nuances into this, but there's a lot going on that we don't see, or perhaps that we don't always think about on a linear level.
Yeah, exactly that. It's unbelievable amount of nuance and different elements that go into it and make it really difficult. And it kind of, from the outside, and again, I'm just a journalist, by the way. So I talk to people who do this, but it's like you never really get a full impression of how these processes work or whatever. So, even from my perspective, you're looking at it, you're kind of thinking, well, they just surely say, we're willing to pay you this, you want that, let's kind of meet in the middle or whatever. But it's just, there's so much more to it in terms of like image rights. And as you say, looking at what the wage ceiling is at the club, what you could get elsewhere. All these aspects kind of come together really and make this a kind of difficult and drawn out process. But like I say, I wouldn't kind of predict with any confidence really which way this one's going to go. It's a really tricky one, but like I say, Liverpool's still saying that talks are ongoing. Konate's camp still saying that there is an aspect that they want to stay. So, I've got every reason to kind of believe that we'll just see whether they can make it work or not. But either way, got to keep him for this season because I think he's too important to lose.